Hi, my name is JC Gutierrez, and I'm going to be discussing race, gender, and class. I'm going to be discussing all three because I feel they're all equally important to the issues that we face today, as well as intersectionality. So we'll just go ahead and dive into the first picture. Um, this first picture was taken when I went to a Black Lives Matter movement protest in Denver, Colorado, a couple years ago. Um, it reflects how race inequalities generate collective resistance and social movements. Demonstrations like this often engage in response to racialized policing, structural inequality, and state power issues that the authors identify as central to understanding crime and justice. Um, it very clearly um, exemplifies race and class, which was discussed in the book. The Black Lives Matter movement was also brought up in the book. Um, in their framework, in the author's framework, protests represent a demand for structural accountability, highlighting how social institutions disproportionately harm people based on how their racial, and class positions. This next photo is a picture of me and my biological brother. We share the same mom, but we have different dads. Obviously, it's very obvious that not only are our genders different, but our color is also very different. We're both mixed race, but he's white appearing, and I'm black appearing. Um, so this photo symbolizes the author's argument that race and gender shape life chances from childhood onward. Um, the authors emphasize how early socialization, family resources, community conditions, and racial identity influence one's exposure to risk, opportunity, and eventual contact with the criminal justice system. Um, Growing up, me and my brother had encounters with the criminal justice system, and obviously we were both treated very differently in those interactions. He would get away with certain things that I wouldn't get away with. Um, for example, a speeding ticket. Like there was one time he was pulled over and he was speeding and also didn't have a license at the time, and the officer let him go. But first time I was ever pulled over, I was speeding a little bit, and they suspended my license. So that was definitely an example of the racial inequality that me and my brother would face throughout our childhood and now adulthood. Okay, so this next picture is of my cousin and her now husband when they got married. Um, it illustrates how legal institutions shape people's lived experiences differently depending on race, class, and gender. Um, the authors argue the courtroom is not just a neutral space, but one where structural inequalities are reproduced, especially through access to resources, legal knowledge, and institutional support. Um, their formal attire and celebratory poses also highlight how marriage functions as a socially valued institution that can reinforce traditional gender expectations um, while also intersecting with class based access to legal processes. This next photo is one that I took of actually my gallery wall to represent race and gender. It's a portrait of a black woman in a gold frame. Um, and these next few pictures are actually going to be very closely related in in the sense of race um, and how it highlights themes of race and gender representation, showing a dignified image of a Black woman that counters historical stereotypes reinforced by social and criminal justice institutions. Um, so, for example, this picture is of my sister and my nieces during a Thanksgiving luncheon that we went to recently. And it aligns very closely with the picture previously as well um, with how gendered expectations and cultural expressions of identity It highlights themes of empowerment, representation, and social bonding, which they connect to the ways of class, race, and gender intersect to shape experiences of marginalization and resilience. The crowns and throne like seat that they were in can be read as a symbolic resistance to stereotypes about Black femininity and class status, reflecting pride, joy, and self definition beyond societal labels. Uh, the authors emphasize how marginalized groups create their own meanings and identities despite structural inequalities, and this image captures that perfectly, I feel, as well as the one before. This next photo is about class. I took it during a homeless outreach that I volunteered for with my church. It shows how an event focused on connecting directly to how poverty and the criminalization of poverty is unequally distributed across racial and gender lines. The authors emphasize that homelessness is deeply tied to structural class inequality, disproportionate racial marginalization, and gendered vulnerabilities such as domestic violence and wage disparities. Um, the setting of how the churches and other nonprofit organizations are the ones to respond to things like homelessness often failed to reflect the broader systemic failure that our public and um, government organizations aren't doing. The churches and the nonprofit organizations are getting out there and doing the dirty work, but you know, our government is not. So I feel like that kind of speaks volumes. This picture is also related to um, class and race. This is a picture of me and my family, and as you can see, I mean, it's also gender. I mean, we're all different genders, we're all different races. We got this red handprint tattoo to signify trafficked and indigenous women. Um, it also reflects community identity, shared struggle, and class based experiences of inequality. Um, the authors note that working class communities often face higher exposure to victimization, economic strain, and unequal state protection, which all, if not all of us, honestly, have experienced at one point in time in our life. Um, and then the red handprints also symbolize a solidarity of trauma, aligning with the book's discussion of how race, gender, and class shape collective experiences with justice and social control. And this last photo is of the skyline city, downtown Phoenix, over my balcony where I live. Um, and it very much symbolizes how class inequality is built into urban environments, and it does put it into perspective, especially when I volunteer for things like the homelessness outreach, just like where I'm at in life and where other people are possibly at in life, and just to be grateful and give back when I can. And um, yeah, so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.